that push and pull between like what kind of man you're supposed to be seems like it's been present in American culture always. But just in our time, in the 1970s, they put Alan Alda on the cover of Time magazine, and it was like the sensitive new age man, and it was kind of like this California guy. There's like Jeff Bridges is part of this thing, a kind of softer masculinity. And then like, we grew up in the 80s with a reaction to that. And I know this is like straight Susan Faludi shit, but like, Rambo and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis and all these other figures that were like these hyper inflated giant muscle dudes, which seemed like whoa. Now I look at that as like, yo, there's like a serious overcorrection happening here after the like sensitive new age guys of the 70s. We get these like nuclear warhead men. And so, take it off from there, Justin, because it feels like that's where we came on board in the story of men. I came online watching Rambo movies and thinking like, is that what I gotta be? And by the time we're in college, Fight Club is happening, and Brad Pitt and them are like a different version of that, but they're also subverting it and talking about it. So it's been, I don't know, it's been a big part of who we are. And Will Ferrell seems like he's right in there with like the male body as like some signifier of a lot of stuff going on.
He really is. And I think even with the body as signifier between Ferrell and Trump too, there's a lot of lines to be drawn that we can that just reinforce that we're talking about the same kind of thing. All these guys are in the same room together. And in the same way that the 80s had a really violent cultural reaction to 70s and 60s feminism, because it's worth noting 70s feminism was in some ways more interesting than 60s feminism. 70s feminism, you had
for sure
the rise of Black feminism, you have the Equal Rights Amendment movement. That shit wasn't there in the 60s in the same way. So the 70s was really a cooler era, I think, for looking at feminist politics.
It's also the 70s, not to interrupt, but the 70s is also the time like when feminist principles are more nailed down in law. So that's where you get like Supreme Court decisions. It's where you get like no fault divorce laws. The first time in the 70s where women are able to have checking accounts. There are all sorts of marital rape laws that come into effect in the 70s. So it's like, in a lot of ways, the 70s are kind of like reaping the benefits of the kind of cultural and ideological work that was happening in the 60s, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think that part of what I find interesting about the parallel you're drawing is in the same way that the empire struck back in the 80s in terms of patriarchy, it clearly struck back in the late teens. 2016 forward, there's a consolidation of a reaction. Now, what's interesting to me is that part of that reaction is racial, and we all understand it that way. It's Barack Obama rose, white people fucking freaked out, white rage, etc. It's also about masculinity, and it's about racial masculinity too. And so the work that Ferrell and a lot of these guys were doing to try to redraw the types of masculinities that were possible. Think about like the metrosexual versus the unreformed Trump buffoon in charge character. Trump comes in, and when you look at the 1-6 dudes, when you look at the QAnon guys, when you look at the Steve Bannon types, when you look at the Matt Gaetz types, when you look at Donald Trump Jr., these are like camp. To me, they're campy because it's so on the surface and so superficial, and it's like they're all really gay-ish to me.
Yes.
But they're also extraordinarily homophobic. And they're policing gender boundaries. They're transphobic. They fucking want women in the kitchen again. And all of a sudden, the unreformed Ron Burgundies come back onto the political scene, and they tap into this well of resentment that's been bubbling up. And that part of the thing that's interesting is the whole Ferrell project, which if you had talked to me in 2010 and said, what's this about? Here it is, Homer Simpson, white masculinity is changing. The whole George W. Bush thing is the end of something. Wrong. It was the beginning of something.
Right.
Obama interrupts it. Tea Party comes back up by the 2010 midterms. The Tea Party is sending like hundreds of dudes to the Freedom Caucus in the House, and these guys are homophobic as shit. This is the same political movement that just a minute ago, when they're legislating gay marriage, which is probably one of the most important things that's happened this year, they're protecting gay marriage, and these guys are fucking voting against it. Hundreds of them those fucking assholes.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You
right.
fucking
Yes.
dick. You know, these guys.
You thought? I mean, we thought all this was over. We really. It's
exactly.
It's weird that that was the culture during the Obama years, especially the early Obama years. It's like we live in Obama arugula world now, and we're all Whole Foods
millennial
shoppers.
avocado toast.
Yeah, he's gonna wrap up the wars. There was a real kind of weird, utopian energy around it, which is odd.